Hello, Repony. It's Fluttershy169 here, bringing to you Once a Crusader by Carpetbagger. In this story, Scootaloo finally gets her cutie mark, but wonders if it was really that important to begin with. This story is a slice of life story, and I haven't really begun reading it yet, so let's just jump right in and hope for the best. Mares and gentle colts, put your hoofs together for the hellion of half-pipes, the most furious thing on four wheels, the purple-maned maverick, the mare that knows no fear. Let's give a warm Manhattan welcome for the equestrian's #1 daredevil, Scootaloo! Scootaloo emerged from the backstage corridor to the top of the giant half-pipe and looked down at the crowd of fans cheering and stomping their hooves below. It was the biggest extreme sport event in Equestria, and she was the main event. The fully grown mare struck a few poses for the cameras, zipped up her purple bodysuit, and got on her scooter in preparation for her stunt routine. Unable to contain their excitement, the audience began to chant her name. Scootaloo! 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 Psst! Scootaloo! Applebloom whispered while leaning over to the sleeping orange Pegasus to get her attention. Scootaloo wiped the drool from her mouth and opened her eyes to see Miss cheerily writing math problems out on the chalkboard. Looking around, the Pegasus realized that she was in the middle of dozing off in class again. Scootaloo had tried so many times to stay awake, but it was Friday afternoon and math was boring. Before she could nod off again, Applebloom poked her lightly with the pencil, startling the Pegasus and causing her to let out a small yell. "Did you have a question, Scootaloo?" Miss Cheerily asked, looking over her shoulder with a sarcastic smile. Cheerily had always been patient, even with the most unruly of students, but today was different. She had plans to meet Big Macintosh for dinner, as a friend, she told herself. But her eagerness made the day go by just a bit slower than usual. The orange filly shook her head and gave an innocent smile, enough to warrant a halo to appear over her purple mane. Miss Cheerily shook her head and turned back to continue writing on the board. Scootaloo glanced up at the clock. 5 more minutes. 5 long minutes. She looked at the chalkboard for a moment and then back at the clock, squinting to make sure that a minute hand didn't move a tick in the opposite direction. Psst, Applebloom whispered again. Scootaloo cautiously leaned over and cocked an ear. Are we still on for the afternoon?" the yellow filly asked. Scootaloo looked over to Sweetie Belle to see that she was more focused on humming to herself quietly than taking notes on her fellow Crusader schemes. Rolling her purple eyes, the orange Pegasus leaned back over to Applebloom. "Yeah, I'll meet you guys at the treehouse later. This is going to be awesome," Scootaloo whispered back with a smirk. "Is awesome enough to share with the rest of the class?" a familiar voice asked. Scootaloo felt a knot in her throat as she looked up to see Miss Cheerily standing over her with the same smile as earlier. It wasn't happy, it wasn't angry, it was scary. I was just telling Applebloom that, The orange filly stammered before smiling to a response that jumped into her head. "Fractions are awesome," Scootaloo called out wittingly, causing the rest of the class to giggle amongst themselves, except for Sweetie Belle. She was still in her own little world of happily humming and writing. "In that case, we can discuss how awesome fractions are after—" Cheerily was interrupted by the bell announcing the end of the day, causing her to look up at the clock. She smiled on the inside, thinking of her quiet dinner for the moment. When she looked back down, there was nothing but an afterimage of a young, energetic Pegasus filly running out of the door. The rest of the class followed suit as Cheerily had to hop backwards to avoid the stampede. The school teacher let out a sigh of relief as she walked over to her desk and took a seat. Looking around, she made sure that she was truly alone. Miss Cheerily reached into a drawer and pulled out a small bottle and poured a bit of its content into her coffee mug before putting it away. She took a sip of her cup and smiled to herself. Kids. Wow, I think you got under Miss Cheerily's coat, Apple Bloom said in concern. She looked really, really mad this time. Ugh, don't worry about her. Besides, we got so much cooler things to do, Scootaloo responded with a devilish smile. Like what? Sweetie Belle chimed in, blinking her green eyes in confusion. Both Apple Bloom and Scootaloo rolled their eyes in unison. What else are the Cutie Mark Crusaders going to do? Get our cutie marks, the orange Pegasus revealed, fluttering her wings excitedly. Let's meet up at the treehouse later. Ready? Scootaloo smiled and reached out her hoof. Both Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle stacked their hoofs on top of hers. Cutie Mark Crusaders, or go! They cheered and leapt into the air. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle parted ways, heading back to their respective homes. Scootaloo strapped on her helmet and hopped onto the scooter. Pressing down on an imaginary pedal, the orange Pegasus fluttered her wings and shot down through the schoolyard. Hey, watch it! A voice called out, but it was already too late. Scootaloo bumped into something big and blue, which sent her falling off her scooter onto her back. The Pegasus stumbled onto her hooves and focused her eyes to see an angry set of dark blue ones meeting hers. Watch where you're going, runt! A colt snarled, furrowing his brows. Not being the one to back down, Scootaloo took an aggressive posture, getting into the colt's face until their noses bumped. You should have been watching where you were going, Windsprint. It's not my fault that you were too slow to get out of the way, the orange Pegasus snarled back, narrowing her purple eyes. Too slow? Windsprint repeated, taking offense. Fight, 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 fight. Several of the other little colts and fillies saw what was going on and formed a circle around the orange Pegasus and the light blue dark-maned earth colt. The animated crowd of students hopped around and stamped their hooves, waiting for some pony to attack. Windsprint took a few seconds to look around at their new audience and smiled a bit to a much better idea forming in his head. How about we settle this with a race, runt? The earth pony colt challenged. Anytime, anywhere, Scootaloo snapped, her eyes narrowing a bit more. Right here, right now, Windsprint declared. First one to the end of the road wins. And I'll even let you use your scooter. Scootaloo stared into Windsprint's eyes as the thought of about the challenge. Every pony at the school knew Windsprint was the fastest runner in class. He even placed third in last year's running of the leaves. But if she was allowed to use her scooter, she might be able to take him. You're on. The younger students lined up along the path cheering. Snips and Snails drew lines at the start of the dirt road to signify the start of the line, and Featherweight made a makeshift white flag. White Sprint was the furthest behind Scootaloo, stretching out his powerful legs. Between stretches, he looked up and glared at Scootaloo, who was more focused on the dirt trail in front of her while fluttering her wings in excitement. Coughing into his hooves, he cleared his throat. Snails announced the start of the race in a surprisingly professional tone. On your marks!